This story is fictional and for entertainment only. Any resemblance to real events is dramatized. Katy Perry entered the legal chamber with a gravity that shocked everyone present. The bright costumes and cheerful personality the public recognized were nowhere to be found. Instead, a woman displaying quiet determination and sharp focus stood. Before them, news reporters whispered among themselves as her identity surfaced on the witness roster. What brought her here? What information did she possess? And crucially, what hidden truths would she expose about Sean Diddy Combs? The legal room, though lacking cameras, hummed with invisible tension. Every gaze focused on Katy. Her appearance had been arranged in complete secrecy. No information leaked, no advance warning. It's just a surprise arrival that shocked both the legal professionals and media representatives. Diddy, seated next to his lawyers, appeared disturbed. He refused to meet her eyes. He spoke volumes without any words being exchanged. When Katy approached the witness stand, she made a small adjustment to the microphone and gazed directly at the judge, then slowly examined the entire courtroom. "I'm present because honesty is important," she started. Her tone remained steady and controlled, yet everyone could sense the seriousness in each word. What followed wasn't prepared celebrity statements. This was genuine, authentic, and about to become deeply intimate. Everything began, she explained, at a fundraising event in 2019, an occasion that appeared normal initially. But throughout that evening, Katy remembered a private discussion with a woman who seemed extremely upset. This woman, whose identity stays protected by the court, shared with Katy disturbing information about Diddy's close associates that was alarming and even frightening. Katy didn't realize then that this encounter would eventually bring her to a courtroom years later. As she told her story, quiet gasps came from people watching in the room. Her words created an image of expensive parties concealing layers of control and fear. It wasn't simply about fame, she stated. It was about power and intimidation. Her eyes remained fixed ahead. Katy described how the woman gave her something. That night, something she didn't open for months due to fear a sealed package. Inside were documents, messages, audio recordings, and proof. Katy, showing clear emotion, informed the court she handed them to her lawyer once the current investigations against Diddy started appearing. The courtroom remained completely silent. Nobody moved. Even the judge leaned slightly forward. Diddy's legal team raised objections several times, but the judge rejected them. Katy's story was being recorded in the official court records. It was real. It was actually happening. Before we explore deeper into this unforgettable video, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and press the notification bell. This way, you'll never miss any upcoming videos like this one. Now let's continue. As the courtroom processed Katy Perry's explosive revelations, everyone's focus turned toward the package, the mysterious collection of documents that had triggered this entire sequence of events. What exactly was contained inside? Why had Katy kept them sealed for such a long time? And most importantly, why had she decided now, of all moments, to finally reveal them? With the judge's permission, Katy continued, her voice staying steady but carrying weight behind every sentence. As if each word was carefully selected, each memory reluctantly revisited. She explained that after receiving the package in 2019, she was uncertain about what to do. The contents were deeply disturbing. There were conversation transcripts, message screenshots, and one specific voice recording that, as Katy described it, sounded like a plea for help. What struck everyone in the courtroom wasn't just the content. It was how Katy spoke about the emotional burden. "I couldn't ignore it," she said. "But I also understood that speaking out too early, without the right moment, could cause more harm than good. I waited because I needed to be certain this would result in justice, not headlines." The judge asked her to provide more details about the voice recording. Katy closed her eyes briefly, then recalled it from memory. A female voice, nervous and shaking, was heard begging to escape what she described as a house that felt like a prison. The voice detailed a night at one of Diddy's notorious parties where phones weren't permitted. Guests were escorted from room to room, and security monitored every movement. She said it felt like she had given up her freedom the moment she entered, Katy explained. And she wanted me to know, in case anything ever happened to her. The courtroom was frozen. A murmur started to spread among the observers, many of them reporters and legal assistants. As the tension reached a breaking point, Katy's lawyer, seated just a few feet away, quietly handed a printed copy of the transcript to the court clerk. The judge reviewed it briefly, then nodded, allowing it to be entered as evidence. At this point, Diddy shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His legal team whispered urgently among themselves. The power balance in the room was changing rapidly. Katy wasn't just another celebrity giving a vague statement. She was providing evidence, connecting pieces, a timeline, a direct link between rumors and proof. She wasn't finished. Katy turned back to the judge. I contacted the woman who gave me the package just once, months after I opened it, but by then, she was unreachable. Disconnected phone, deleted social media accounts, gone. Her voice cracked slightly. I don't know where she is now, but I believe she gave this to me. For a reason. The prosecution sat quietly, eyes locked on Katy. It was clear that her testimony had filled in several missing pieces in their ongoing investigation. Her story didn't just support existing allegations. It added a new dimension. One that included not just Diddy, but those who allegedly helped him maintain control, manipulate stories, and silence voices. And as Katy stepped down from the witness stand, you could feel it. Something had shifted. This trial was no longer about rumors. It was about uncovering a system of fear hidden beneath glamour. A machine built not just on power, but on silence. And now that silence was breaking, piece by piece. The room watched. Her walk back to her seat, her head held high. She hadn't come to entertain. She came to testify. And in doing so, she might have just changed the tide. As Katy Perry returned to her seat, the courtroom sat in shocked silence. Her testimony wasn't just dramatic. It was historic. For a celebrity of her status to risk everything by stepping into a federal courtroom, delivering names, dates, and actual evidence against one of the most powerful men in the music industry. This wasn't just about courage. This was about justice. But the silence didn't last long. The prosecution, clearly energized by the strength of Katy's statement, wasted no time. They called their next witness, an investigator who had been working behind the scenes for months. What he revealed next began to pull back the curtain on a network that went deeper than anyone had imagined. He confirmed that the documents Katy submitted aligned with evidence already in their possession. The voice recording, the screenshots, and the transcripts had matching details found in other testimonies. What Katy Perry brought forward was the missing piece, he said. It tied together timelines, validated testimonies, and confirmed communication between known associates of Mr. Combs and alleged victims. But here's where things took a darker turn. According to the investigator, the woman who gave Katy the package wasn't the only one to mysteriously vanish. In fact, 3 other individuals listed as potential witnesses had either gone silent or could not be located. 2 of them were last seen at Diddy's private events. One had attempted to file a statement but withdrew it shortly afterward under unknown circumstances. The room shifted. The jury members exchanged quiet, uncomfortable glances. The gallery, packed with journalists, industry insiders, and silent observers, was visibly shaken. People weren't just realizing Diddy might be guilty of something. They were beginning to understand the scope of what was hidden behind the velvet, ropes and luxury facades. And then came the most chilling part of the investigator's testimony. He revealed that encrypted communication between Diddy's security staff and private associates had been intercepted through a warrant. In those messages, there were mentions of specific individuals being neutralized or managed. Were vague. But the context painted a terrifying picture. At least one of the messages made direct reference to the pop girl who has the package, which prosecutors now believed referred to Katy in the envelope. Katy's presence had not gone unnoticed by the people trying to keep these secrets buried. She wasn't just another pop star with a conscience. She was a target. The courtroom collectively exhaled as that message sank in. Had she waited any longer? Said any less? Or handed the envelope to the wrong person? things could have ended very differently. But her decision to come forward when she did may have protected others. The investigator confirmed that since her testimony was made public, 2 other silent witnesses had reached out to authorities willing to talk. The dominoes were beginning to fall, and yet there were whispers, literal whispers in the gallery, from people wondering who else knew. If someone as high-profile as Katy Perry had been drawn into this, how many others had seen the signs and stayed silent? Was this an isolated incident, or part of a much larger, buried scandal? That question hung in the air like smoke. As the session ended for the day, the judge ordered a recess. The tension hadn't eased. It had only deepened. The courtroom emptied slowly, with people walking out in quiet disbelief. No cameras meant no footage would leak. But word of mouth. That was already spreading like wildfire. Outside the courthouse, crowds were gathering. Protesters, fans, media, and curious onlookers held up signs. Some supported Diddy, others rallied behind the victims, and many just wanted answers. But one thing was clear. Katy Perry's voice had ignited a fire that wasn't going out anytime. Soon, inside, the prosecution regrouped. The defense scrambled. And behind it all, the truth kept rising to the surface. One name, one file, one voice at a time. The next morning, the courthouse was surrounded by an even larger crowd. Reporters, activists, fans, and curious bystanders filled the sidewalks. Some holding signs that read, "We believe survivors," while others shouted support for Diddy, claiming the whole thing was a witch hunt. But inside the building, far from the noise and chaos outside, the real storm was unfolding. The court resumed. And this time the focus shifted to someone the public hadn't heard from yet, a former assistant of Sean Combs testifying under protective anonymity. The judge granted full voice distortion and visual privacy. What this person was about to share had the power to shatter reputations and possibly rewrite the narrative of Diddy's career forever. The witness began by describing their time working in Diddy's inner circle. First, it felt like a dream job, the assistant said. Private jets, celebrity parties, 5-star hotels. But then it turned into something else. The tone shifted. There were things we were told not to ask about, rooms we weren't allowed to enter, people who arrived and disappeared without ever being introduced. The assistant recalled seeing Katy Perry at a party once, years ago, at one of Diddy's infamous private mansion gatherings. She was with a group, seemed relaxed. But later that night, I was asked to delete footage from the hallway cameras. I didn't ask questions. I just did what I was told. But looking back, that night and others like it were full of things we were trained to forget. The prosecutor pressed for details, and that's when the assistant mentioned something that echoed Katy's earlier testimony. The woman with the envelope? She came to the house at least twice. I remember her. She was quiet, kept to herself. But after her second visit, Diddy's mood changed. He held a meeting with the staff and said, "No more phones, no more slips. Anyone leaks anything, they're done." That was the same week Katy received the envelope. The room went still again. The assistant continued, revealing that several NDAs had been circulated among the staff shortly afterward. People were paid off, transferred, fired. Diddy's team had tried to erase any trace of that woman's presence. He was scared of her, the witness said. And after Katy's name came up in one of the meetings, there was a panic. This wasn't just a culture of secrecy. It was fear-based control. The assistant even admitted that some staff had burner phones strictly for internal communications, designed to disappear if things got out of hand. We knew too much, and we also knew that knowing too much could get us in trouble. Meanwhile, the defense team tried to poke holes in the assistant's credibility. They brought up job termination, possible resentment, and lack of direct witness to any crimes. But it wasn't working. The jury was listening closely because this testimony, combined with Katy's, was forming a clear pattern. A world within the music industry where luxury masked something far more sinister. Then came the next twist. The assistant revealed that, in 2020, there had been an attempted cover-up, a hush payment made to the same woman who gave Katy the envelope. I wasn't part of the payment, they said, but I saw the email trail. The offer came through someone close to Diddy's financial manager. High 5 figures under the table. The woman refused and then vanished. The assistant's voice trembled. As they said it, one day she was around, and the next, nothing. Her number stopped working. Her emails bounced back. We were told not to mention her again. The courtroom sat frozen. This wasn't just celebrity gossip anymore. This was starting to feel like a criminal enterprise operating in the shadows of fame and music. As the judge called for a recess, the prosecution team could be seen flipping through folders, documenting timelines, cross-referencing phone records. The jury, even those who had seemed skeptical at first, now leaned forward with eyes wide open. Something huge was unfolding. No matter how much power, money, or fame Diddy had, this trial was peeling back the curtain. Outside, the crowd had grown restless. Social media was exploding with speculation. News anchors scrambled to report every new detail. But inside that courtroom, the people closest to the truth were just beginning to speak, and one thing was becoming terrifyingly clear. Katy Perry's testimony wasn't an isolated moment. It was a spark. And now, it was starting a fire no one could put out. The courtroom resumed after recess, but the atmosphere had changed. You could feel it in the air. A shift so heavy that even the defense attorney seemed to sense that the walls were slowly closing in. Each testimony wasn't just revealing details. It was building a structure, brick by brick, that painted a deeply disturbing portrait of Diddy's empire. An empire fueled not only by talent and business, but by fear, silence, and control. The prosecution wasted no time. Their next witness was a digital forensic analyst who had been working behind the scenes for months, sifting through recovered phones, encrypted messages, deleted files, and cloud storage backups. What he found sent chills through the room. He explained how, through a court-approved digital trace, his team had recovered metadata from an old device once linked to a former member of Diddy's security team. The files had long been wiped, but the fragments that remained told a dangerous story. One folder, partially recovered, entitled Night Angel, contained multiple voice memos, private photos, and what appeared to be surveillance logs. Everyone leaned in. Among those recovered logs was a direct reference to the woman who had handed Katy Perry the envelope. The logs showed surveillance of her movements weeks before she disappeared. She had been followed, car routes mapped, contact list downloaded, conversations recorded. It wasn't just a breach of privacy. It was a calculated campaign of intimidation. And Katy, her name came up too. The analyst revealed that her name appeared in a text message dated only a few days after she received the envelope. The message, sent between two private contractors, read, "The singer has it. If she talks, we're done." That was the moment the courtroom collectively inhaled. Katy Perry hadn't been randomly involved. She had been targeted, pulled into this because someone believed she could be trusted, and someone else believed she could be silenced. Diddy, seated at the defense table, was no longer the composed mogul who had entered this trial with quiet confidence. He looked tense, his jaw tight, occasionally glancing toward his legal team as if searching for reassurance. But there was none. Not today, the forensic analyst continued, explaining how multiple files were encrypted with code phrases only known to Diddy's inner circle. Some of these codes matched ones found in NDA contracts leaked during prior investigations. This wasn't amateur, the analyst said. This was structured, deliberate, and protected with layers of digital armor. Then came a file the prosecution had been saving, a heavily redacted email, confirmed to be sent from a known associate of Diddy. The subject line read simply, "Katy knows." The body of the email was a list, dates, times, known contacts. Implication was clear. They weren't just aware of Katy's possession of the envelope. They were planning how to respond. You could hear a pin drop. The judge allowed the jury to view a censored version of the email. The reactions were stunned. One juror's hand went to their mouth. Another scribbled notes furiously. The chain of evidence was becoming undeniable. And every chain led back to one person. But the defense, clearly on edge, stood and objected. They argued that the data was incomplete, that the messages lacked direct context, that Katy's involvement was coincidental at best. They tried to paint her as a well-intentioned outsider caught in a media circus. But it didn't land. Not after what the jury had just seen, because now the jury wasn't just weighing allegations. They were staring at hard digital evidence, records of people being watched, threatened, erased, and a famous singer who had everything to lose, and nothing to gain had stepped into the storm to say this isn't okay. As court adjourned for the day, the prosecution's team looked more confident than ever. They were building a case not around celebrity rumors, but around concrete facts. Katy's. The voice had become a catalyst, but now it was the data that was doing the talking. Outside, the world buzzed with theories and shock. Diddy's fans were split. The music industry was rattled. Celebrities, once silent, began tweeting cryptic posts. Some supported Katy, others deleted old photos with Diddy without explanation. A shift was happening, and deep inside that courtroom, one truth was becoming harder to ignore. What had started as whispers behind closed doors was now a roar, demanding accountability. And it was growing louder by the hour. By the time day 6 of the trial began, the energy inside the courtroom felt different, sharper, more tense. It was as if everyone sensed that they were approaching something irreversible. And now the case was teetering on the edge of full-blown revelation. But no one, absolutely no one, was prepared for what was coming next. Court opened with murmurs from the gallery. More celebrities had been subpoenaed. More names were emerging, but before any of them could take the stand, the prosecution introduced a surprise. A key witness who had only recently agreed to testify under full protection. This was someone the public didn't know. But behind the scenes, their name had been floating in sealed documents, redacted from earlier filings. And now they were ready to speak. Her identity remained hidden to the public, but in court, she was simply referred to as Witness X. When she took the stand, covered by court-ordered privacy protections, the room went completely still. Her voice trembled at first, but what she said next made even the court officers pause. "I was there the night Katy Perry was approached," she said. "I saw the woman hand her the envelope. I heard the warning. I know why she disappeared." The room froze. This was the first direct eyewitness account connecting that. X began recounting how the woman who approached Katy had confided in both of them, albeit briefly, during a quiet moment at the event. According to Witness X, the woman had said, "If anything happens to me, make sure this gets out. People need to know who he really is." That line hung in the air like a ghost. Then came a detail no one expected. The witness testified that shortly after that night, she herself began receiving anonymous messages, threats disguised as warnings. Strange cars outside her home, unexpected visitors at work, social media accounts hacked, all seemingly random, but too frequent to ignore. "They wanted me to be scared," she said, and it worked. "For a while, I stayed silent. But then I saw what Katy did, and I knew I had to speak." Her decision to testify wasn't taken lightly. She'd relocated, changed jobs, severed ties with anyone remotely connected to Diddy's circle. But what compelled her now was guilt. That she had stayed quiet while others risked everything. Katy didn't have to do what she did. She didn't owe anyone anything. But she stood up, and that gave me the courage to do the same. Then came the bombshell. Witness X confirmed that the woman who gave Katy the envelope had once worked directly for Diddy, not as a performer, in PR, but as part of what she called the control team, a small group of handlers and scouts who were allegedly responsible for managing the women invited to Diddy's most private events. They were trained to keep everything quiet, she said. They take phones, change names on guest lists, monitor conversations. It wasn't just about protecting Diddy's privacy. It was about hiding what was really happening behind those mansion walls. She paused, took a breath, and added, "The woman who gave Katy that envelope, she saw too much, and she wanted out." The prosecution leaned in, clearly knowing what was coming next. Witness X confirmed that, in the months leading up to her disappearance, the woman had reached out to multiple people, including lawyers and journalists. Most of them never responded. But she didn't stop. She believed someone out there would listen. That someone was Katy. As witness X described the final time she saw the woman, nervous. The sound of pen scribbles and keyboard clacks. She looked like someone who knew time was running out, the witness said. Before stepping down, witness X said one more thing. Something that carried more weight than any evidence presented so far. This isn't about one man. This is about a system. A culture. A machine that eats people alive and leaves only silence behind. But we're not staying silent anymore. The judge recessed the court early that day, likely to give the legal teams time to process what had just been laid out. The jury filed out slowly, faces pale, visibly shaken, because now this wasn't about what might have happened. It was about what did happen and how far it might go. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had nearly tripled in size. Some held up signs that read "Justice for the Silenced." Others just stood there listening to updates on their phones, trying to wrap their heads around the reality of what was unfolding. And inside those walls, one question echoed louder than ever. If this is just the beginning, what else is still hidden? The answer would come soon. It's very soon. Because the most shocking revelation of all was still to come. The courtroom was silent when Katy Perry returned, called back for a second round of questioning. The public didn't know this was happening. It hadn't been leaked, announced, or whispered. The decision came in real time based on the momentum of witness X's testimony. And now, Katy walked back to the stand, not as a celebrity, not as a witness from the past, but as the thread that connected it all. She looked more composed than before, but there was an intensity behind her eyes, a fire that had been lit by everything the trial had exposed. She took her seat, adjusted the mic, and nodded at the judge. The prosecutor stepped forward and asked just one question. "Miss Perry, are you ready to tell the court what was in the envelope?" The room went breathless. This was it. She took a deep breath and began. "It contained 3 things," she said. "A letter, a USB drive, and a list of names." Everyone leaned forward. The letter, Katy explained, was handwritten and dated just 1 week before the woman who gave it to her vanished. It described in detail the fear she was living under, the surveillance, and the threats. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a record of events. A final log from someone who believed they wouldn't live to see justice done. The words haunted Katy. She wrote, "If you're reading this, then I was right." The USB drive was even more damning. Inside were video files, grainy, secretly recorded, shaky, but enough to show scenes from inside one of Diddy's private estate parties. Phones weren't allowed at those events. Everyone knew that. But somehow, she had recorded. The video showed groups of people, some well-known faces, being guided from room to room by men in black suits. Some women looked disoriented. Others looked scared. The sounds were muffled, but there was enough to suggest that what happened in those rooms was not consensual. The prosecution didn't play the clips. The court had deemed them too graphic for public release, but the jury had seen them. Katy confirmed it, and their reactions, horrified, stunned. Some looking away, told the rest of the story. Then she spoke about the list. There were names, dozens. Some were already public figures. Others were unknown. According to the letter, the list included victims, witnesses, former staff, and people who knew but stayed quiet. It was a map of everyone who had come in and out of Diddy's closed-door world and who had seen what they weren't supposed to see, and then came the turning point. Katy paused, her voice thickening as she recalled something chilling from the letter's final paragraph. The woman had written, "There's one room no one ever comes back from. If they take you there, it's over. I've seen it. I've cleaned up after it. I've kept quiet, but not anymore." That sentence landed like a hammer. The judge leaned back. The gallery was frozen. Diddy, for the first time since the trial began, looked broken, pale. His hands gripped the table. His eyes avoided everyone. Katy then said something that would echo beyond the courtroom. "I don't care what happens to my career after this," she said. "If I'm blacklisted, so be it. But if I stayed quiet, if I let that envelope sit in a drawer and pretend it never happened, then I'd be no different than the people who let this continue for years. I refused to be one of them. She wasn't just testifying anymore. She was exposing a reality the world had only dared to speculate about. One where the glitz and glamour of fame masked an underworld of silence, fear, and abuse. And in that moment, it was no longer about Diddy. It was about every powerful figure who used their influence to erase victims, manipulate narratives, and destroy truth. The courtroom erupted not with sound, but with impact. The judge recessed early again. The jury was escorted out quickly. The media scrambled to rewrite headlines. But outside, something extraordinary was happening. People were no longer just asking questions, they were demanding answers. Online, thousands of women began sharing stories. Hashtags emerged. Voices that had been buried were rising again. Other celebrities began speaking out. Some in support of Katy, others carefully neutral, clearly shaken. List was leaked. A powerful executive, a close associate of Diddy's, a man who had long been protected by silence and PR teams. And now he was being investigated. Katy Perry didn't just give testimony. She lit the match. And by doing so, she may have started the most explosive reckoning the industry has ever seen. The ripple effects of Katy Perry's final testimony didn't stop at the courthouse steps. They exploded across the world like a shockwave. Within hours of her declaration, the internet ignited. News outlets ran breaking banners across every major platform. Headlines screamed, "Katy Perry unveils the room of no return." Social media flooded with reactions. Celebrities, influencers, activists, survivors, everyone had something to say. But beneath the noise was a deeper truth. Something irreversible had just been set in motion. Inside the courtroom the next day, you could feel that truth tightening around every corner of the case. What began as an investigation into Diddy's past behavior had evolved into something much bigger. A full-scale dismantling of the protective veil that had hidden decades of power abuse in the music industry. And Katy had just torn that veil open for the world to see. The judge opened the session with a stern tone, acknowledging the impact of the previous day. "We are no longer simply assessing criminal allegations," he said. "We are navigating the unraveling of a culture built on fear." Then came the moment no one expected. The prosecution called in a new witness, an investigative journalist who had been quietly working behind the scenes for years. She had been threatened, blacklisted, and even sued in the past for trying to expose what she knew. But now, armed with documents and testimony that matched Katy's evidence. She was ready. She held up a small black notebook, worn edges, tabs sticking out. "This," she said, "is the record of everything they tried to bury." She had notes of multiple meetings held at Diddy's properties, code words used during phone calls, lists of people paid off to stay silent. Some were victims, some were staff, and some were gatekeepers, people whose job was to look the other way in exchange for loyalty, status, or money. What made the courtroom sit up straight was when she flipped to a specific page and read aloud, "July 12th, 2020, room for C, no phones. VIP only," she cried afterward. No one checked on her. Silence that followed was painful. She matched that note to a timestamp on one of the USB files provided by Katy. The same night, the same party, the same victim, caught in the background of a grainy video clip, her face pale, her body trembling, being led out of the frame by two men in suits. This wasn't coincidence. This was confirmation. The defense scrambled, objecting furiously. They tried to challenge the journalist's credibility, tried to discredit her work, called it speculation. But the prosecutor calmly presented a signed affidavit. One of the names from the list had just come forward, a former House staffer. And their story matched the journalist's notes to the word. That's when the courtroom started to shift from stunned to horrified. The judge ordered a private review of the journalist's notebook and granted immediate subpoenas for 3 people named inside, 2 of whom were still active within Diddy's current business ventures. Panic flickered in the defense's corner. He sat with his eyes cast down, unmoving. For the first time in the entire trial, he looked like a man with no strategy left, and still. Outside the courtroom, the world was erupting. Other victims began speaking up. Posts with the hashtag room for sea-flooded social platforms. Stories of abuse, intimidation, coercion, stories long ignored or dismissed. And suddenly, the industry that once celebrated silence was being forced to listen. But then came the final blow of the day. The prosecution revealed that federal investigators had officially launched a broader inquiry, not just into Diddy, but into his entire network. Record labels, executives, PR firms, and handlers. Katy's envelope, the USB drive, the testimony from Witness X. The black notebook, they had triggered a chain reaction far bigger than anyone imagined. And as the judge adjourned, he left the room with one statement that no one will forget. What has been revealed in this courtroom is no longer a matter of celebrity scandal. It is a question of justice that reaches into the core of an industry, and justice will be served. Outside, the crowd roared, not with anger, but with hope. Because now, thanks to a woman who could have stayed silent, a witness who disappeared, a journalist who refused to be erased, in a courtroom brave enough to listen, the truth had finally broken through. And for the first time, it couldn't be silenced. The courtroom was no longer just a place of law. It had become a battleground between two worlds. The illusion of untouchable power and the unstoppable force of truth by the time Part 9 of this trial unfolded. The entire nation the entire world was watching. News vans lined the street 4 blocks. Helicopters circled above. Major publications had gone from publishing gossip columns to printing legal breakdowns. The eyes of the public had shifted from entertainment to accountability. What had started as a high-profile celebrity trial had transformed into a cultural reckoning, and at the center of it all was Katy Perry. This day, she wasn't testifying. She sat in the gallery, quiet but resolute, surrounded by security and members of her legal team. She watched as others, emboldened by her courage, finally stepped into the light. The first to speak was a former producer who had worked with Diddy for over a decade. He walked with a slight limp, a scar visible just under his collar. What he shared wasn't just shocking, it was terrifying. He testified under oath that the room of no return wasn't just a metaphor. It was real. It existed in one of Diddy's private residences, heavily guarded, soundproofed, and accessible only to a select few. He had seen it. He had helped wire it for sound and surveillance at first, believing it was for VIP interviews or recording sessions. But then he noticed something else. No recording ever came out of that room. Nothing was published. The drives were stored in a locked safe, separate from the studio archives. We didn't ask questions, he said. We knew better. One night, he was ordered to delete a file labeled with a woman's name. He recognized from one of the viral hashtags now dominating social media. He opened it before deleting. What he saw, what he described in court, brought the entire gallery to tears. The woman had been recorded without consent, vulnerable, alone. Her cries muted behind music playing in the background. The file had a timestamp and GPS tag. That matched the date from the journalist's notebook and the USB drive Katy provided. This was no longer testimonial overlap. This was forensic synchronization. The courtroom was still. Jurors sat stone-faced, their eyes fixed on the witness, absorbing every word. But it didn't stop there. The producer revealed that Diddy had built an internal system, a system of payouts. Silencing protocols, legal clean,